Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to this session on Fireside Chat. This is going to be a very, very informal session, both for me, for the speakers, and as well as for you. So, on my immediate left is Trideep Mukherjee. He comes from Games 24/7. There was a big uh, proverb which played in Bengal called Khala Habe, and he immediately switched on to and came to Games 24/7. Okay, so one thing which we have in common is that he started his career with TCS. Uh, he has moved on. I am still there, and immediately to the left of Tridip is Josie George. We again have in common that we both are Chevening Fellows. We did in 2016 in UK in Cranfield University. He has continued to remain with cybersecurity. I have moved on. So the only thing which is connecting both of you together, based on what you guys do in your day-to-day life, is artificial intelligence. Okay. So Tridip, first question to you. Your designation currently is Chief Data Scientist and AI Officer. Have you ever dreamt of it that this is a designation, and what this designation actually means?
It's a very interesting question, right? I come from a science background, right, with all the scientist mindset to begin with. And I remember those days, right, where, it used to be a difficult proposition to convince the organization that you need to invest on science, which is futuristic, right, which is not going to yield result immediately and things like that. And suddenly we are living in a time right now where science innovation is the reality, right? You can't survive as an organization without that. So I guess probably the longest CXO title one
Okay.
can imagine. so essentially what it means is, especially from the perspective of gaming, I can tell, is to be differentiator. Innovation is the key. And I think it's not only true for gaming, but irrespective in today's day and age, right? Chief data science and AI officer is at the forefront of that innovation from an
Okay.
organization
Okay.
point of view, to create that innovation culture, to bring in science into the business, right? Which is a very critical part of it, that how you can contribute scientifically in the business operations, right? And that's where this role kind of comes up too, and that's where an organization like ours, which where science of gaming is a key ethos, becomes a very important part of it.
Fantastic. So you are bringing science into business, and you are not in the business of science.
That's a very good way of putting it. Yes.
Okay.
So the single word answer is yes. I think again, I don't know how much time I have.
So we have 1 hour. So
So look, I think I'll just step back a little bit, right? Just from a gaming perspective. So if we think about it, gaming as a domain, as a business, has been growing immensely, and it's not in India; it's globally, right? It's a multi-hundred-billion-dollar business space that we are talking about. And even in India, it's been growing heavily, right? Double digit in terms of CAGR and all of that. And in such a growing business, what is most important is, why is it growing? First of all, because of all the technology advancement. Today, smartphone is like penetrated like anything. And then you need to bring in all sorts of innovations into the way the product is being seen by your user, in this case players, right? Now that's where AI comes in as a very critical element to bring in all of those innovations, right? And how do we bring in that, right? I can talk from a games 24/7 perspective, is that we think that we are a technology organization at heart, right, who has a passion for gaming, right? And that's how we are extremely data driven. Data is getting collected, because players are playing games. Data is getting logged. You can look into that data to understand the users, right? Understand the players, what they might be thinking, unlike any other internet ecosystem, right, or internet product, what happens is like the user is spending the time on the platform itself, everything. So there is no off-channel thing that is going on, right? There is no logistics or a supply chain that needs to be managed, which is out of this platform, which is connected but out of this platform. Here, when somebody is playing the game, they are in the platform, right? From beginning to the end, right, of that session, right? So you can collect a lot of information, how they are playing the game, and then what are their choices, what are their propensity in terms of what they want, and so on and so forth, and then bring in those scientific aspects in the mix of it. So if you have a scientific way of looking at this data that gets created, and then try to mine back, right, what the users might want, right, what the users might be thinking, and then kind of craft your offering or tailor your offering towards the need of the user, is what, yeah, where all the innovation comes in. And not only that, right, there is a lot of business operations, that innovation that goes in over there, and I can speak a lot about it. That's why I asked how much time I have.
So I'll talk about this actionable insights which you mentioned, but let me move on to Josie for now. So Josie, again, your designation is a pretty long one: General Manager, Cybersecurity, Emerging Tech. So what essentially this means? What is that you handle?
Yeah, so I come from Wipro, and I'm part of the cybersecurity and risk services practice there. We basically help customers secure digital infrastructure that is getting rolled out across the globe. And within cybersecurity, there's two ways to look at change that can happen there. One is new types of tech that comes with its own risks. So AI is one example. AI can be used, to build more efficient infrastructure, but AI can be attacked as well. So AI can be used in cybersecurity on one end. On the other end, you can attack AI as well. So it's a dimension that we're looking at. But my remit is basically anything that's emerging. So we look at quantum crypto as well, which is now at a getting closer to the tipping point. A lot of organizations are worried about harvest now, defibrillator type of attacks that can come, particularly in the government sector, financial services, as well as in telecom. And the third element that I look at, again, touching on emerging tech, is on open source, which is now, as from a supply chain perspective, a lot of open source is being used across the industry. If you want to talk about supply chain attacks, the most recent one that happened on the pagers is an example. But you look at a broad spectrum of attacks that can happen as a result of issues around the bill of materials that goes into building anything. And from a security standpoint, that's an area that we are looking at. So that's me. I also do other stuff. There's a research publication that we do called the State of Cybersecurity Report. Do it every year. And it's something that we've started pushing out from this part of the world. If you look at cyber, and if you want to track generally what's going on, what people globally look at is the Verizon's Data Breach Investigation Report, DBIR. That's the gold standard. It's been around for 15, 16 years now. Over the last 5 years, we've built out a following through this. We cover quite a lot of ground on nation-state attacks, how that sort of plays out across the globe. All the typical actors from certain parts of the world to certain parts of the world. There's also elements of innovation that we track, patent filings, VC funding in cyber. It's a very interesting area, a lot of action happening there. So it's a ton of things that we're covering, and I helped drive that. I've been doing the 5th edition now, working on the 6th one.
Oh, fantastic. So what do you see in the future? AI being used more for defense or more for the attack?
Yeah, it's an interesting problem to look at, right? I mean, if you see, and if I were to simplify cybersecurity, to a very, very minimalistic nature. I mean, if there's anybody deeply into cyber, you will thrash me. But if you were to look at it from what people do day in, day out, it is about, managing vulnerabilities that people introduce in infrastructure, and how threat actors can exploit that on one side, and how you can, as an owner of digital infrastructure, how can you minimize the impact of those vulnerabilities? How can you patch them and figure out how to remove those weaknesses that exist. And if you look at it from that perspective, I mean, I don't know how many of you are familiar with terms like zero-day attacks. Are you? Very good. Fantastic. Oh, there's 5 or 6. Oh, quite a lot of them. So if you, hands are going up slowly. So, and if you look at, I mean, that's a very nice way of looking at it, right? I mean, any kind of digital infrastructure. So today, most of the time, people talk about vulnerabilities in cloud and social media and other things. A lot of things are getting connected now, from connected cars to pacemakers to whatnot. So penetration of digital into everyday life is just immense. And anything that has an IP address is game for an attack. And I would go a little bit more further and say, even if you don't have an IP address, there's some types of attacks that have worked on audio signals, which is the most bizarre one that I've seen, where somebody was able to get a malware into a set of machines that were not on a network. I mean, they're not connected to the internet, at least. So, and the whole thing, I mean, the data exploitation in that particular case was done through the malware sending out reading data and then sending it out through the speakers of the laptops at a frequency that you can't hear. So it's at the edge of 20,000 hertz. So obviously the human ear can't hear it. And if you've got a high gain antenna that can pick up low frequency signals a kilometer away, you can still, it's not high bit rate, but still an interesting type of attack that can happen. Right? So vulnerabilities on the system, they start with the vulnerability being introduced to it becoming public. And the 0-day is one such example where there's no patch available. The vendor comes out of the patch, and then finally you patch it. So that is the window of attack that anybody has against you, right? When you have vulnerabilities in your systems. And AI can be used on both ends of the spectrum. So one is AI can be used to detect those vulnerabilities as early as possible. It can also be used to fix them now. Now with all the co-pilots that are coming out, you can write code to release a patch as fast as possible. The DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency of the US, is working on a pretty interesting project. The target is about 2025, where they want to fix open source vulnerabilities using AI. So imagine a large-scale AI service that's available that can read open source code, patch them, and then push it out. So today it takes a certain time for the community to release a patch. Right. So AI can be used on both ends of the spectrum. Now, if you can use AI to detect vulnerabilities, so can threat actors, so can your adversaries. If you look at marketplaces like Hugging Face, I think there's about 900,000 models available. Obviously, a lot of them are replicas of the existing ones that they've tweaked and released. So it's a level playing field. I mean, there's tons of models that are available that you can download, create your own attack vectors, and push out on one end of the site. And the other side, you can try and fix them. So whoever moves faster is the answer. I mean,
whoever moves the fast. So in this supply chain attack which you mentioned on the pager thing, what is your opinion? Who moved? How it fast moved? I mean, where it happened actually?
So, I mean, I think the verdict on that is still out there to be released. But it basically brought out what people have been talking about for a long time. I mean, SolarWinds happened some time back, where people were able to get into a product company's supply chain and introduce a malware that was pushed out to thousands of enterprise customers. The possibility for the supply chain attacks was, I mean, this has been around for a while now. The pager one was an extreme scenario, obviously, in a different sense in terms of using explosives and stuff like that. But if you look at the stack that people are using in IT today, whether it is a typical operating system to an application to anything that's internet, IoT type, there's a lot of elements that you don't know where it's coming from and who has touched that code and when. Particularly open source, it's even more complicated. So maintaining or understanding what's gone into check, yeah, what's gone into the bill of materials that has gone into building anything is a huge challenge. So your assurance process has to extend now to across your third parties, and with AI coming in, the problem has got complicated from just looking at software to what's gone into training models. So the data that's actually gone into training, and that's a different type. It's basically a provenance issue. You don't even know what kind of vulnerabilities exist in the models until you are able to test them across the spectrum. And today, testing of AI is limited. How much of time do you have? How much of it's a big problem to deal with. So the supply chain issue is only getting worse now with AI.
Thank you. So I left you, Trideep, at the point of actionable insights. So in your gaming industry, it is a very rapid deployment of new features and functionalities. So what are the tools and processes you use to do this deployment for actionable insights taken from your AI engine?
See, I think let's step back a little bit. Let's try to define what is AI, right?
Okay.
I think if you look at the scientific evolution, right, what science essentially means is that it tries to mimic the behavior of something which is natural.
Okay.
Right? In this case, artificial intelligence is trying to mimic the human intelligence, right? That is the whole purpose, and that's why it's intelligence, but it is artificial. Um, Having said that, right, when it comes to actionable insight, when you have data, right, I think if we spend enormous amount of time, right, looking at the data, we will have some insight from our side, right? You will have all those dashboards, you will have all those various visualizations, and you will have certain insight, right? It's just not scalable because we are talking about millions of users, right, and different kinds of insight that you need to check, right, terabytes of data. You just can't do it, and that's where AI comes in. It kind of automates the insight generation process, and the way it automates the insight generation process can get applied in various different ways, right? One is for us, right, that okay, from these terabytes of data, how you can create this insight. For example, right, if somebody is inclined towards playing a certain types of games, right, you basically try to understand from the data automatically, and that's where AI comes in. We have our own in-house models. It has to be in-house because the data that on which that need to be trained on is very different. The behaviors are changing there, it is shifting, as you were saying, that there is a rapid need for development, and more often than not, it's an iterative experimental process, right? So first insight is always going to be something which is very basic, right, which may be simple rule driven, which might be just an automation of how our mind is thinking, right? And then based on those insight, you run certain experiment, and then based on those experiments you collect more data, and you then understand as a human being, as a scientist, that okay, how you have how the user's behavior is shifting, changing. Then you bring in more sophisticated models, you know how to tune those models, what kind of features to bring in, right? Because look, I mean, if going back to the example, if somebody is inclined to certain types of games, tomorrow a new game comes in, right? How do you then have that insight whether this new game is going to be successful or not, or liked by this kind of user or not? You can't, right? So you have to experiment, right? Because whatever you learned till that point is from the past data. I mean, AI is all about learning from the past data. We are now in that inflection point through generative AI where we say that okay, we are not going to be only learning from the past, but we are going to also define the future, right, in some way or the other. So to answer your question in simple words, right, there are two three major points. One is it's an iterative process, so that's the process aspect of it. Then there is a platform aspect of it, right, where you need to have a very robust experimentation framework through which you are able to statistically conclude what is working, what is not, right, in a very rapidly changing environment. And number three is the people aspect of thing, where, as human beings, right, as analysts, as scientists, we also think like the user, right, and then we bring in our scientific thought process in the in that understanding, and then try to convert that data into an insight back into something which can be actionable. Right now, of course, there are a lot of other automations that we are bringing in, but this is just from a high level. These are the major things that we look into, and mostly it's in-house built tools.
So the framework which you mentioned, does that framework ensures the quality of your product, or do you have another quality check processes built on top of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think also Joseph was kind of hinting towards it, right? How do you check, test the veracity of the AI system in some sense, and all of that? And it's a very open question in my view, right? And it's something which is under work, right? Work in progress from the entire community. The way we do it is, as I said, right, the purpose is to bring in science as part of the business, right? So it has to connect to the business, right? So there has to be certain business metric that is connected to whatever we do. This business metric could be, increasing engagement of certain types of users, or maybe even decreasing engagement of certain other types of users, right? Who should not be engaging or people should be engaging in a safe manner. But whatever it is, there is a proper metric that is defined, and then whatever AI system that gets built, right, and this experimentation framework that I was speaking about needs to be properly aligned with that metric. Now, this experimentation is framework is a very challenging problem in gaming, right? People who come from a statistical background, you will see that you must have heard of this term of hypothesis testing, right? Testing, right, where you have two population of data and you compare those data and you say that statistically this population is performing differently than this population, right? In gaming, you don't do anything. You select those two populations and let them be, right? You will see that after 30 days they are different. You haven't done anything, right? It's that natural noise that comes into the system, and the signal to noise ratio is pretty low, right? It means that the noise is very high. And because of all of that, what happens is that it becomes a critical part that you have the necessary tools available or created that can conclude, right, that if you see a difference, is it a noise difference, or is it something that the metric has actually shifted? Okay. And that's what we have invested in internally to come up with something, and that's a very critical core to how we operate, because without that you can't do any other thing on top of it.
Absolutely. So, yeah, please.
From a cyber standpoint, I think when it comes to testing, is an interesting domain that is sort of, blowing up slowly now. I'll take an example, right? If you, I was telling this to somebody in the outside as well. If you take a autonomous vehicle, I mean, things are moving the ADAS in a certain direction, and obviously all of the autonomous vehicles that people are testing out there use vision-based AI to make a lot of decisions. So there's the stop sign. You look at that, the AI detects that as a stop sign, the car has to stop and let others pass, whatever. And there's enough academic papers that have been published, which have been tested on these cars, where you can bypass that particular detection cycle. So one example that was just done in April, I think, was by a team of experts. They were able to use an LED flashlight, just an LED flashlight, and flash it on the stop sign in a certain frequency. And because the car, in this particular case, I think they tested a Tesla and a Baidu vehicle. The way the CMOS sensor reads reads it by line, so it's a high frequency pickup. But the LED light that was getting flashed confused the entire thing that was getting picked up. So while the human being would still see it as a stop sign, the AI got confused and saw something else and drove past, right? And this is completely non-intrusive. So somebody standing on distance and flashing on LED light. if you were to get this into, Hollywood level craziness, if you are able to get hold of the car, put a timing device on that, you could get to 97% accuracy. And it's not, I mean, after what happened with the pagers, you can expect anything to happen in the future. So and how do you test this, right? I mean, the makers of the model were focused on a particular problem: identify the stop sign, act on it, right? What you're talking about here is data perturbation attacks. If you take that image surface, the amount of change that you can bring through change of data is just infinite. I mean, there's so much that you can do there. And to test, going back to the point that you were saying, how much of variations can you go and test and bring in? So in this particular case, they were able to go back and for the LED scenario, retrain the model to address it. That problem is sorted out now. Tomorrow something else will come up. How will you go and fix that particular issue? So it is if you want to become paranoid, you can extend the training of your models left and right from a cyber standpoint, and try to address various kinds of use cases. The hacker will come up with something new, and you'll have to deal with it.
Fair point. So, okay, please, I'll come to you. You want to add something here, or we can go for the questions?
No, I think I just wanted to add, I think very valid point that, with any technology, what happens is that you need to understand what are the blind spots of that technology, right? And with an AI technology, the blind spot is like on which data it got trained on, on which data it learned from, right? This is a perfect example, right? The data it learned from the AI system is correct, right? The correctness, all the robustness check, if you do, it's the correct thing, right? But it's just that interpretation, that the data interpretation is very different, right? And that's where created the problem. And I believe lot of work needs to go in. Anybody who is hearing this, and we actually invest a lot on this, is to have a proper monitoring framework for AI, right? And this, when I say monitoring framework, I don't really mean AI system after getting deployed, but even pre-deployment,
Development phase.
In the development phase itself, what is the SDLC cycle, life cycle equivalent? Like we have SDLC life cycle for software engineering, right? What is the equivalent of that in an AI development process is something that is not well standardized, I would say. I mean, everybody is doing that according to their own internal need. We do it according to what we believe works, and it comes from the business use cases, the business metric, that the translation of business metric to the actual interpretation of the data, and so on and so forth, and it becomes an iterative process. But that cycle, what is that standardization, is something that needs to be looked into.
So just to give you input, that ISO IEC Joint Technical Committee 1, there is a subcommittee called SC42 on artificial intelligence. They are already having a standard on that is called 42,000 series of standards. So they have done their bit, but lot of revision takes place every now and then because the field itself is quite evolving.
Correct.
But there are certain standards which has emerged in those subcommittees.
The only issue is, as you said, right, because there is a lot of evolution happening, and what is happening is that the algorithmic innovations are happening at an extremely rapid pace.
Yeah.
Now, what was not true yesterday suddenly becomes true today because of a new algorithm that has come in. So how to keep pace of these standards are something that also needs to be looked at.
Absolutely. So I'll at this point in time, I'll go to the fellows here to see what questions they might have. Okay.
Okay, hey, my name is Shivakumar Dakshinamurthy. I have a very specific question. Actually, I have two questions. Let me combine it to one. You can able to answer it on this now. My background is cybersecurity as well as AI governance. I'm CSSP plus AIGP. Okay.
So I think I am the wrong moderator here.
No, it's okay. You are asking the right questions. So when it comes to gaming industry, obviously it's a business. So you talked about the model, the data. So do you have any very specific responsible AI governance? Because that's very important, right? You are collecting a lot of data,
Yeah.
and you know that who are the frequent the players, how they're winning, all this logic you are defining. I don't want to get into the detail. But when it comes to responsible AI framework, how it has been, done, I just wanted to know that on behalf of fellow members also. Another one is, I think maybe Joshi talked about on the AI security, AI for security side. When it comes to model, a lot of POC is happening, but the models are not well protected. Adversarial testing, I don't know how much they've done. What kind of security mechanism is being put on the AI models? Maybe you can able to throw some light. Could be helpful, because my research is on AI security and governance. Just wanted to know that. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Should I go
Tridip,
first?
yeah.
I think first of all, thank you for asking this question, right? Because when I spoke about the fact that it is very important to understand what the users need, right? The need for the user might be at a given point in time to be more responsible, right? And an AI system needs to be built, right, to understand that fact. And we have been investing very heavily in that piece. So I will break your point on responsible AI into two parts, right? One is whatever AI system that we are bringing, whether those AI systems are responsible, which means that whether anybody can explain why AI is predicting something, let's say if it is a prediction problem, versus the other thing, right? So there is a proper explanation framework and there is a proper actionability on top of it, right? So that's one aspect. That's the more conventional understanding of what responsible AI is. But for us, responsible AI also means how AI is getting utilized, right? What is the purpose AI is getting utilized for? And one of our biggest investment in this space is how to identify players, right, who needs a different kind of help, right? So we have a proper responsible gameplay framework, and it's a very difficult AI problem. One of the most difficult AI problems, I can tell you that, because we are talking about identifying 0.01% of the users from a millions of user base. It's not even not all, not anomaly detection. Anomaly detection works at a 10% user base you need to identify, right? But we are talking about scarce anomaly detection. So we have a in-house model called SCAR-SGAN, which was also published, right? So this SCAR-SGAN model, what it does is essentially it tries to understand the user's evolution, right, in terms how they have been strategizing and playing the game, right? And then whether there is a shift in that strategy and the way they are playing the game, both in terms of the decision making inside the game as well as outside of the game, in what games they are choosing, right, and so on and so forth, right? Based on all of this understanding, this model then tries to, so this is pre-Gen AI world, right? We were using GAN, which is kind of using a generative power of AI. So we were trying to simulate the behavior that the user should go in, right, or might go in, and if there is a deviation on that, right? And depending on the deviant, we were doing some kind of an anomaly detection. Now, this SCAR-SGAN model is being deployed. It flags users on a daily basis, right? That says that, okay, this is a user which requires a different kind of handling. They are then taken to a completely different journey. They are taken to the counselors also. And depending on what the counselors say, we even block them or regulate their gameplay. So this is a big part of our AI investment, and a lot of research investment in AI from our side is actually going into that. And not only this, right, we are also trying to bring in certain level of explainability on top of it, which essentially means that we are trying to see a trajectory shift of the user, and each state of the user or trajectory, we are being able to explain that why this shift might have happened. And then we see that whether we can forecast, right, if the user is going to that potential domain of not so be responsible in their behavior. And then depending on that, like whatever is the, let's say user is playing more, right, on a given day, and we think that this playing mode is probably going to take the user to a different thing, then we are trying to bring in various different kind of nudges or interventions in our product that can help guide the user's journey in the correct direction. So thanks for asking that question, because this is a very big domain that we are working towards.
Thank you, thank you. Response from Josie, and then we move on to the next question.
So I'll also take a stab at what on the responsible AI part of it before coming to the security part. I think first of all, I was very pleasantly surprised to see Tridip's title, from an AI governance standpoint. I think in the US, so let's look at the organizational dynamics, right? This is a problem of governance, and it has implications from a risk standpoint, from a legal standpoint, from a privacy standpoint, and from a security standpoint, right? When I look at very large organizations across the globe, and I think the US, with the directive that came from Biden administration on, at least for the federal government agencies, they've asked for a chief AI officer.
Chief Data Scientist.
And chief AI officer was the title, I think. Which I think is happening now, and some of the private sector is following up and appointing. In this particular case, is amazing that they've gone ahead and done it proactively. If you look at, and the problem is a problem of silos, right? So if you look at it from the existing hierarchy that exists, legal, they're interested in knowing compliance and with the EU AI Act, for example, for European companies, the US, the Biden directive, and the NIST standards that came out. And many other countries have now got some AI bill that's coming up. So everybody has got to comply with it. So legal is, the general counsel is interested from that dimension. Security guys are only focused on, what are the rest of the floors are building, will it get attacked? Will my name come on the newspaper? And how do I prevent that, right? So from a security standpoint, the robustness is what they're interested in. Privacy, what kind of data is getting used to train these models, and will I have implications as a result of that? Problem is that nobody's bringing all these problems together and trying to solve it. And going back to the points that he raised, right, from fairness to robustness to explainability and things like that. So there is an issue of executive action and ownership that needs to be solved out before all of the technological elements can be addressed, right? So that is definitely there. I think the world is moving towards it, and as more and more news comes out, board members will ask tougher questions of the executive leadership, saying, what are you doing about AI, and particularly responsible AI? And as a result of that, things will move. Now, coming to the second part of the question, which is the security part, adversarial testing. The dynamics here are very interesting. So you have on one side very smart machine learning teams, engineers who are building out fancy AI stuff within organizations. So in some cases, buying stuff that is commercially available. And then you have the security folks who are typically lagging behind on the curve in terms of what's happening there, who are coming and trying to say, while you're building all this cool AI, I want to make sure that this is secure, right? Now, the problem is that first, to make something secure, you need to know what the problem is. You have to scan and figure out what the weaknesses are. After you find out the weaknesses, you got to go back and tell them, I want you to do this to fix it. And that is where the issue is. Today, if you do adversarial testing, what do you go back and tell the ML guys to do after that? The easy answer is, which is actually a difficult one to implement, is go back and retrain. Okay, what do you retrain on? How do you generate that data? And when you do retraining, it has its implications. There are business aspects of the AI that get impacted. And generally that is not good. So the security guy gets blamed saying that, or because of you guys, we went and retrained and now the model is behaving and saying something else now, right? Maybe the security part is addressed. And so that's not ideal, right? So there is this tension that exists between security folks and ML folks as a result of that. And there are newer solutions that are coming out. One is, instead of retraining the model, you kind of create a micro model that resides along with the actual original model. And the micro model works as a defense model. So if an attack happens on the larger AI model, the micro model sort of, I don't want to go to the technicalities of it, but it sort of acts as a policeman sitting in between, jumps in and stops an attack. And it also helps to meet a lot of compliance requirements. So if you want to, if the regulation says that you have to monitor your AI and report any attacks that are happening on it, then you have now, through this mechanism, a way to meet the regulatory compliance requirement from that standpoint. So training on one side, or retraining, or some other creative ways to work around that particular issue.
Thank you. We have a question there. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Deepika, and I work for the Data Security Council of India. It's an industry body established by NASSCOM. So we mainly look at AI from a privacy perspective, and as everyone's been talking about responsible AI, ethical AI, and as all of you also rightfully pointed out, that one of the critical areas of data privacy issues comes in from the data that you expose to the AI models. So that will lead to a privacy issue. But one of the proposals that we are proposing from DSCI is instead of releasing real data sets to the testing environment, we have suggested to like expose synthetic data sets to the testing environment. But however, from our industry stakeholders, we also have they've given some concern saying that it won't be able to capture the nuances, and there might be chances of the AI to hallucinate. So I wanted your perspective on how do you believe it's promising to use synthetic data sets for AI model training?
Sure.
Okay. We'll take another few questions and then we can answer together.
Hi, so this is Shresh. My question is specifically to Trideep. So we know the benefits of AI in your industry as well, tracking user behavior and all of that. Your organization has built a lot of games. So my question is with respect to the value lock-in aspect of AI. So while the benefits of AI are understood, the also important aspect of when we play games is that users look for novelty. For example, a lot of games are there which resemble PUBG, but nobody has that much traction. So my only question is, do you think the AI, specifically the problem of having too much data, relying on too much AI, can actually become an impediment to innovation? So that's what basically the question
Okay.
is.
That's a good question. Thank you. We'll move to the other question.
Yeah, good afternoon, sir. I'm Tarun Kaushik. I'm a fourth year BTech cybersecurity student, and my question is not related to AI. I've heard AI for like 47 times in this session, and like as coming to the emerging tech in quantum computing, as it's rising, the modern quantum computers are able to break the standard encryption algorithms. Even now, AES are could be broken. The algorithms like Shor algorithms and Grover's algorithm. So, like, what strategies should be apply, to safeguard at least from today, so that we could safeguard our sensitive data, because everything privacy totally works on encryption thing, and if encryption we are able to crack encryption, then the privacy would just be a myth. So
Okay.
that was my question.
Yeah, you
I think
start.
first and third.
Yeah.
So first of all, Data Security Council of India is doing a fantastic job. We've been working with them for many years from Dr. Kamlesh Bajaj's time. Vinayak's an old friend. On the question that you asked on synthetic data, that is it's an interesting combination to look at, right? I mean, you could use there's different types of AI. First of all, going back to what Trideep was trying to explain, there's the classical machine learning type of AI on one side, and then you have the more recent one, which is the large language model based one. A lot of work that's happening now centers around using LLMs to create synthetic data that can then be used either to train other small language models or classical ML models as well. It is a good approach if you're looking at certain narrow AI problems, right? If for that particular purpose, we are seeing that it is helping to solve the issue of not having to use quality production data in the training process. But if you're trying to broad base there is a challenge with respect to the type of data that you can generate synthetically and to train as a result. So there is that clash that is there between what kind of problems can you solve with synthetic data versus what's available there. Now, on the question on quantum, that's an interesting one. I think quantum has been talked about for a while now, but I think with the way NIST is moving forward with the algorithms that have been selected now, and the way the quantum computers are progressing as well, I think we're getting closer and closer to that inflection point. At least in the last 3-4 years, I never saw many security folks being that worried about quantum being an issue, right, to solve. Maybe some Swiss banks have started doing quantum key distributions, encrypting up to about 300 kilometers, their communications between sites and stuff like that, using QKD. But now there is that worry that if one of the nation states is able to develop a computer that can break traditional cryptography, and it has been shown, then what happens? So the strategy that now some of the boards have started asking questions to management, particularly as I mentioned right at the beginning, when it comes to government entities, some types of financial services companies, as well as telecom. The one thing that people can do is to create. You need to know what you are up against. If that inflection point comes, you have to replace traditional cryptography with post-quantum crypto, so that it is, you can prevent those kind of attacks. So first thing you need to know is what does your attack landscape look like, right? Do a discovery exercise across the existing infrastructure and build what is called as a crypto bill of materials. So what kind of crypto is used in the databases, on the website, on the VPNs, to wherever else crypto is being used. You got to understand that landscape first. There is things that you can do around discovery. The second thing that you can do is around being prepared for that tipping point to happen. At least build up your crypto infrastructure to support post-quantum crypto. So you got to have hybrid cryptography going on. So you can't switch everything overnight. Many of the vendors, software vendors that are there, don't support post-quantum crypto today. So there's nothing much that you can really do in those kind of situations. But at least your key distribution infrastructure and all that can be hybrid in nature, and that is something that people can build and be ready. So if that tipping point comes, then everybody will act, and you'll get to that.
Okay. Trideep.
Sorry, was that a follow-up?
Today's cybersecurity are mainly focused on how AI could affect the computers and they could take away. But I find quantum computers, Okay, so I wasn't audible. Yeah. So the thing is, in the modern cybersecurity days today, people are more on how AI would affect cybersecurity and how it would give risk to the users. I find quantum computing should be more, risky towards it, and the cybersecurity field should focus more on quantum computing as well, including cybersecurity, including AI as well. Because it shouldn't be ignored. It's a pillar.
I mean, it's a timing issue, right?
It's a timing
Quantum
issue,
is a timing issue. It's important, but will everybody be worried about it? I don't think so. Whereas AI, as adoption increases, it is now and present. So it is.
Yeah. Okay. Trideep, your response to the questions.
Yeah, I think I'll go for the second and the first one.
Okay.
Touchable, but to begin with the second one, and it's a very important point at this today's day, right? Is
Closer.
okay. Am I audible? Check.
Yeah.
Okay, so I said that is a very interesting question to discuss. Essentially, AI system should not be thought of something which is going to replace human intelligence and creativity, right? And that's not how we think about it. It is to aid it. It is to provide the necessary ammunition, right? That can be utilized to scale the innovation up, right? And I think I'll give you a specific example, right? Because from data you apply certain algorithm, you come up with certain insight. Let's say we are doing some smart segmentation, right? In marketing space, STP, segmentation, targeting, positioning, right? You are doing some smart segmentation based on data, right? Now what does the algorithm do, right? It looks at the data, it tries to find the necessary cut, and it will say some very intriguing thing, right? A user who has played less than 17.5 games. What does 17.5 games mean? It doesn't mean anything. It's just from the mathematics, it kind of brought up something, some insight and all of that. Should it be utilized as is? No, right? It's giving you at scale certain tool that helps you understand, oh, okay, this is what is looking like in the data. The decision has to be with the human. And it is also very important to look at an org level, right? What has to be a human in the loop AI system and what can be a human out of the loop AI system. I mean, you can't have complete human out of the loop AI system today. We are investing in AI, for example, right, where we are working towards using generative AI to generate insight from the data automatically. It's like you don't have to write SQL queries. You are asking some natural language query to the data, and the data gives you like what is the number of games played by these kind of users today or yesterday, and you get the answer, right? So internally what is happening, some Gen AI, some LLM is converting this query into an SQL query which is running, fetching the data, and you are getting it, right? Is it perfect, right? Is it going to be utilized with complete human out of the loop? No, it is a tool that is given that humans need to be able to utilize it in a responsible way, and that's where also responsible usage of AI come in, right? So I think to answer your question, it is very important to have the proper platforms and processes in place. When I say processes, I mean like at what point or what system human need to be part of the decision making, right? They will need to have the final call, right? They will need to bring in the creative thought. If I am creating a marketing creative, right, from AI, let's say a video creative, right, then it has to be the creative team who will have to take the ownership. Otherwise there is no accountability of that system, right? Who is taking accountability if something goes wrong, right? AI system will not take the accountability. Some human being will have to be accountable, right? Either the AI developer or the user of the AI, and I think it's a combination of both. So it is not to reduce the innovation in general from data, but rather to aid innovation further, right, in a certain way. So
Thank you.
I'll just quickly touch upon the other question about synthetic data. I think I, coming from a technical background myself and scientific background, I have a different take on that, right? I think it's a great thought, to be very honest. But, when we are synthetically generating data using an LLM or whatever modern AI system that we have, let's be cognizant of the fact that these AI systems, and this has been theoretically proven recently, is bound to hallucinate. You can't avoid hallucination, right? No matter what mitigation mechanism you apply in terms of fine tuning, in terms of RLHF, whatever the techniques are being utilized, it is bound to hallucinate, right? Now, if that is the case, basically you are creeping in certain error in the data, and then you are building an AI system on top of that erroneous data, which is learning something that it should not learn. It's kind of going away from the fairness and all the responsibility that we have been speaking of, right? So my take is that in systems where data is much more standard, predictable, repeatable, I think you can go for synthetic data and try to build an AI system. But in a noisy environment, I think it is going to bring in a lot of disaster to happen.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, are you guys okay for another 5 minutes? Okay. No, two more questions.
Yeah, so I have a question to Mr. Trideep. So under the India's Data Protection Act,
Can you introduce yourself?
I am Aditya. Under the India's Data Protection Act, companies are not allowed to process data of minors. And you being a gaming company, I'm hoping that you have a lot of minors as your database. So my question to you is, how are you guys actually obtaining the verifiable consents of minor? And the second related thing that I wanted to ask was, you mentioned a lot of AI tools that you're using, such as the suggestive algorithm. Now this has concerned the Indian government, and they want to legislate on it. So in light of this, do you have any internal policy when it comes to data processing or related to minors? And if not, do you believe there is a need for one?
We don't have to think of it internally because we don't allow our platform for minors, right? So we have a very robust KYC process. We are, and then based on that, we are trying to only allow people, right, who are 18 and above, right? And offer, even more, we are offering for 18 to 22 years of people, right, in a very regulated way, right? So it's not the same offering. The limits are different, everything is different, right? And that's all determined by KYC in general, right? So there the question is how we are ensuring that the KYC is robust enough, right? And that's where we are bringing in certain AI as part of that to look into the KYC document properly and so on and so forth, right? But it is a KYC driven process which is only offered for non-minors, right? So that's the answer to the first question. Second question, I think what you mentioned is if we have an internal policy, not from a minor point of view when we are working on AI for understanding the users, but yes, there is a certain certain set of conventions that we follow in terms of how we are utilizing the AI system, right? And the robustness of the AI system, it comes primarily from the data that is getting fed into the AI system, how this data is getting fed into, why this data is getting fed into, and all of that. So we believe that AI development happens, 5% is the development, right? 80 to 90% of the time we spend on data, right? What data needs to be brought into the system. I think algorithmic development is something else, but certain robustness that we are bringing in terms of the data governance that can get into the AI, and also what is the guardrails and expectation from the AI system. And then once we have that defined, then we have, as I was saying earlier, we have a proper monitoring framework that we establish. This monitoring framework might be different for different models because the specific statistical metrics might be different that needs to be tracked and which needs to be developed separately. But the overall policy, the requirement that a model is not live or not considered live, right, unless we have this necessary dashboard available to us that can look into all of these governing.
Okay,
Right.
thank you. Last question.
Yeah. So I'll be quick considering that lunch's break is there. So my question is on the adversarial testing and the your comment on that you need to go to the 0.01% of the users to get address that. So the unintended outcomes that AI generally gives out, say for example, how much of it? I mean, many policies talk about the human oversight or user oversight over these outcomes. For example, Uber charges me a higher price for a ride. For example, I can ask for correction as a user of it, reconsidering the charge. What kind of in your experiences, how much you undertake the human oversight or the user oversight over the decision making to mitigate these outcomes?
I think to translate it in this particular context of 0.01%. So basically, I'll translate it into the actual statistical metric that we look at, right? Um, so there are two things like precision recall. I think any AI model will have that. Precision means that out of 100 people we have identified, right, how many are actually correctly identified? That's like the true positive, right? And recall is just the opposite, right? How many that we missed out, right, in general. In this particular case of 0.01%, we are prioritizing on the recall, right? Our precision can be low. So 0.01% is a very difficult problem because so basically what it means, like if you have 1,000 bags over here, right, 1,000 balls in a bag, right, and you randomly pick, some 10 bags, what is the proportion? Essentially less than one ball, or in this case, I mean, that's not a very good example, but you understand the gist of it, right? But here we are talking about we have to pick out this 100, that all 100 should be correct, right? Which will not be possible, which is not statistically, mathematically possible also. So we are now at a position where our precision is 40%. So 0.0, randomly if we pick, if it will be 0.01%, now we are picking a set, right? 40% of them are actually going to be in that category. Now, what is that 60% that is getting misclassified over here? What is happening to them, right? They are being taken to the counselor, right? And probably they shouldn't have been, right? But they are. right? And because they are taken to the counselor, that's a friction in their journey, and maybe they are getting disheartened and they are not engaging. We said that that is the cost of our system, and we are okay with taking that cost for being responsible and making sure it's a safe environment.
You are okay with that cost?
Yes.
Okay, okay, thanks. So, just 1 minute last questions to you from my side. How much is feedback loop important to you from your personal standpoint? Because you're representing with, you're working with web. Oh, the panelist understood. Okay. So, how much is a feedback loop important for you in the context of personal experience?
In general terms,
In general terms, because we are just closing, so just wanted insight from a personal side of yours. The same thing for you as well.
Yeah, I get feedback from my wife every day. So,
Okay. So you are a good.
I absolutely, it
Okay.
is part of life. I think nowadays the teenagers are also giving you a lot of good feedback in terms of what we know and what we don't know. But in a most generalistic term, absolutely, it is part of growing up and keeping up with times. So that input that you get from all of your peers, all of your stakeholders in different ways is absolutely critical. In fact, there's lot, even when I go back and look at work itself, in terms of the incoming batches that come from colleges, the way they look at life actually gives you a lot of perspective in terms of how the consumer audience looks like, in the real life. So there's a lot of things that you can learn from them. There's also wisdom of the ages that you can gain from people who have already passed that particular bridge many times from your
Thank
seniority.
you. Thank you, Josie. The same question to you, Trideep. How much importance is feedback loop to you?
I think Jose is lucky, he's getting it every day. I'm getting it every hour. So, anyways, I think without feedback in today's day and age, it's very difficult to grow, right? Especially in the domain that I am in, right? In the AI and also in gaming, right? Users are telling you new things every day, right? And you need to learn that. AI is a very dynamic environment today. The technology is changing almost every day. Every year, how many conferences are there? New research are coming out. New algorithms are out. Unless you get that feedback to you, right? That okay, you need to keep evolving yourself, right? You won't be able to sustain. So I think it's a very critical part of today's technologist in general is what I would talk about in
Yes. So I'm getting a signal to stop here. So just if you are getting feedback from your wife every hour, when are you working?
now.
No. Okay. So thank you so much, Trideep. Thank you so much, Josie. A token of appreciation from our side, Dr. Meeni.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Meeni. Thank you, Josie. Thank you, Trideep, for an excellent fireside chat.